As I was writing this particular set of books, I would sometimes have videos playing in the background just to keep me company or to give me a break from the writing. And for the most part, a lot of these videos were from YouTube and the YouTube section that is commonly known as Booktube. And these Booktubers became parasocial relationships that I began to value. And I'm not sure when it happened, but I subconsciously made my favorite Booktubers into my target audience. It became me writing for them, writing stuff that I thought they would love, because these were readers telling me exactly what they wanted to read. And it was such a fun challenge to try and write what I thought they might like. So I'm going to share a few of these Booktubers and reasons why I think these books that I wrote for them. Hi, my author pen name is Lorraine Maniseda, and this channel is a little experiment that I'm curious to see the result of. Thank you for being here, and I hope you are entertained.
Hand away and whispered that he wasn't going to give me an orgasm and a steak and shake. I wouldn't have minded. Maybe you should have fucking minded. What did this establishment ever do to you? Imagine you're a minimum wage worker just trying to survive your job, and you see these people going at it like teenage horn dogs. She wanted his steak and he wanted her shake. Imagine having to clean up a booth after that. This is why unions were made. I've seen less vile shit in the ball pit at McDonald's.
I recently have been doing this reading project where I took a bunch of My Fairy Loot books and I was reading them to see if it actually would be something I would actually enjoy or if it was going to be a DNF. And let me go ahead and spoiler alert, there are lots of DNFs. These books are not good. They look good. They look amazing. The marketing is great. The sprayed edges, the special editions was great. They're beautiful pieces to keep on your shelf if that's all you care about, which some books, I'm not going to lie, that's all I care about. But so many of these books look beautiful on the outside. They ugly inside.
10 miles across if I had to guess.
I personally love it when a damaged, delusional, freshly 18-year-old misfit knows how to properly gauge and accurately estimate geodetic distance. Not only do I love it, but I believe it. Like, why wouldn't Winnie Hoare have this skill set in her toolbox with her brains and her boobs?
As for the other characters in the story, I was going to say I don't have strong feelings about them, but I feel like I wanted to punch almost all of them in the face at least once. Maybe not like the barkeep that grunts a lot. He was fine. He also says like 3 words the entire time, but pretty much everyone else in the story I wanted to punch in the face at one point or another. So world building.
When I did my engineering degree, one of the electives I chose was a marketing class. I remember one of the lessons in selling a product being about having a target market. We were taught that one's target audience had to be specific, incredibly specific, down to their physical features. Sometimes we'd even give this customer a name. And the reason for knowing your ideal customer so well was to be able to convincingly sell to them. And writers have their own version of this. While we're not always writing for the market, we usually have an idea of the people who might enjoy our work. As a writer myself, Booktube totally simplified picturing my ideal reader. Heck, I didn't even have to picture them. Booktubers were readers who were always telling me what they like to read. And as I wrote my story, I realized that I could cater to their likes. So this video is a list of the top 10 Booktubers I absolutely adore and whose videos I always find myself going back to, sometimes more than once, for the value that they provide. This is my ode to them, my paying homage to all the work they tirelessly put into their videos for us. I know that these Booktubers will probably never see this video, let alone read my books, but as I explain who they are and how I ended up writing for them, I want to emphasize that I will be forever grateful to them for what they do. I have been listening to Marines for a couple of years now, and I am a total fangirl. I find her videos evocative. I find that she has intriguing points of views on a variety of subjects. She's very analytical and she's keen on themes. And for a writer who's interested in including thematic subjects in their storytelling in a subtle way, this is really useful for me. And she's amazing at explaining book plots and her thoughts on the plot beats, her thoughts on the book structure, her thoughts on the characters. And the way she explains it usually changes the book for me because I see it in a way that I hadn't seen it before. And I really love that feeling. She is critical, but she's also fair. In every single one of the critical points she makes, she also offers a solution or an example of other writers who've done it in a different way. And I actually find that useful for both readers and writers. And so she's been instrumental in improving my writing skill. So this is the part where I tell you why I think Marines would like the book that I'm writing. And the first reason is because it is a serious attempt at the exploration of new adult. And I know she put up a video not too long ago about the difference between new adult and young adult. And I'm hoping that this book kind of gives an argument as to the difference between the two when it comes to themes, tones, and relationship development. So it would be fun to see her tear that apart and see if it does indeed give a little bit of a distinction between young adult and new adult. The other thing is that it has a lot of common tropes that are subverted, or at least I think they are. I've taken quite a number of tropes that are popular that I have kind of twisted to fit the world building and to fit the characters and the plot development. And I'm really hoping that that is interesting for her to read. And also, Marines is a fan of world building if it's done in a good way. And I hope that she enjoys this post-apocalyptic world where vampires are in charge, and how I have built up the setting of the vampire powers and the human interaction between when it comes to those who are being farmed in the vampire barns and those who live free in the jungle. And finally, I do remember a video where she mentioned that she loves quest fantasies. This series of books is not a fantasy, but it is a paranormal quest or supernatural, depending, because sometimes vampire books are categorized in either paranormal or supernatural settings. So I'm not really sure what the distinction is at the moment, but yep, it's a quest, and she loves quest fantasies, and I'm hoping that this will be a quest paranormal that she likes. Let's go to the next booktuber who helped me write this book. Jess Owens has been keeping us informed about the shenanigans going on in the publishing and book industry for years, and her book community videos are some of my favorite videos on BookTube. Aside from that, I also absolutely love her book review videos because of the passion she pours into reviewing a book. For Jess, if a story is good enough to pull emotion from her, then that's a good story. It doesn't matter if it has flaws, or if its structure is not perfect, or if its prose is a little bit wonky. If the story is good, if it makes her feel something, then she will absolutely praise it. And if a story is not jiving with her, if it doesn't make her feel anything, Jess is not afraid to just leave a book behind. She DNFs like a boss. And I absolutely love that, because there's invaluable intel for a writer to know why a reader would start a book and then not finish it. And Jess is one of those readers who will tell you why she didn't finish a book. She is one of the earliest booktubers that I got to discover, and so for that reason, she was definitely going to be on this list. Now, why would I think the story I crafted is something that Jess would like to read? The first reason is the length of my books. I've heard Jess complain more times than I can count about these massive tomes being released in the fantasy genre in the last few years, and how most of them could easily have been cut in half and not affected the story. I think that the books in my trilogy, each around 70,000 words, would be a relatively quick read in comparison, and definitely a reprieve for Jess from the massive fantasy volumes. Speaking of reprieve, I think that a fast-paced, action-packed, post-apocalyptic, supernatural new adult adventure romance would likely be a wonderful break for Jess from the romantasy books currently flooding the booktube space. Having a greatly flawed black female protagonist leading this female-centric story doesn't hurt either. I think it was the third or fourth video that I watched on Rachel's channel where I learned about her past with religious fundamentalism. In that video, she explained her fundy past and how she finally left the group and went on to experience a more fulfilling life with her husband and her wonderful sons. And it was actually this video that made me subscribe to her. You see, about a decade ago, I also walked away from a high-control religious group, and it was a great choice. I'm a lot less anxious, I'm a lot more authentic, I'm unafraid to be curious, and I experience so much more empathy in my day-to-day. Now, I don't always agree with everything Rachel says, but I greatly admire the efforts she puts into preserving and protecting the ability of others to have a life and experience much more beyond the shackles of extreme fundamentalism anytime that she can. She really advocates for people who've been in that life and who are trying to leave, or even just normal people who are being affected by those who are in these fundamental religious groups and are trying to bombard the public with their views and their beliefs. So I'm always in awe of people who do that, and I will always support those who are helping in, I don't know, fighting this fight, I guess. So yeah, she was definitely going to make it into this list of those booktubers who affected and inspired what I've written. So why do I think Rachel would like my books? Well, for one, the story is inspired by my journey in leaving that high-control religious group that I mentioned before and finding my place in the world. The main character, the protagonist, her name is Hardley. She escapes a vampire barn, and once she's beyond the walls of that compound, she has to contend with the fact that everything she's been taught from birth while living in the barn wasn't necessarily true when pitted against the real world. And yeah, she has to relearn a lot of things. She has to find out that what she thought was true might not be true. And this is like a source of great internal conflict for her, which I think was pretty cool. But it's not just the ex-Fandy rep that I think Rachel might like in this book. Another reason she might find this book interesting is because the story is heavily plot-driven with a distinct North Star type of goal that leads the main character and the story down to the very end. And that's in addition to having distinct characters pulling the story forward. I think the fact that the story is also very sapphic and just generally queer and sex positive also doesn't hurt. I only discovered Maddie's channel earlier this year, but I've been hooked from the first video I watched. She has an authenticity and openness to her that is incredibly likable, and how she delivers her commentary is wonderfully entertaining. There's a slight contradiction in her likes and dislikes, noticeable if you watch several videos, but it makes total sense once you've watched her over and over again, and it just makes her all the more relatable and real because we all have issues that we live in the gray about, and it's not always black and white. And she exemplifies that really, really well. I also can't get over the moments when Maddie becomes savage, because there's some videos where she rants, and I am obsessed with these roast videos and her critical eye that calls out problematic stuff in books in a way that I would have never thought about. This is an art, and she is a clear master of this art. So why do I think Maddie might like my book? Well, a story's pacing is a feature that Maddie tends to notice and often comments about, especially if it's off. And I feel like I kind of tried to hone into the pacing of these books, and maybe she might find it a little bit more amenable than some of the books that she's read recently. So this story that I've written is a collection of fast-paced action scenes, and then there's mid-paced adventure scenes, and there are a few lulls in between where we see the characters going through some development or the romance being explored. And I've tried to kind of organize all these in a roller coaster fashion that is lyrical, maybe, hopefully. I hope it's lyrical, but, I could be wrong. It could be off. She could probably hate it. Take this all with a pinch of salt. But yeah, so I tried to focus on pacing, and hopefully she'll like it. And the other thing I do know is that Maddie is very, very much over the whole romantasy stories that are currently really popular. And I figure a dystopian supernatural quest story might be a little nice diversion from that genre. And so, yeah, I hope that draws her in as well. Leonie is one of the most wholesome YouTubers, not just booktubers, that I've subscribed to. And I think it's impossible for me to watch any of her videos without a little smile on my face because she's just too lovely and whimsical and fun. And her book reviews are incredibly conscientious. She will always show grace to books that she might not be a fan of. She's super open to change and super open to growth and learning. And she even gives books that she's read before and didn't like a second chance because she realizes that with time comes change in reading tastes and mental states and circumstance, and this might lend to seeing a particular story that she didn't like before in a completely different light. In fact, one of the videos she just did not too long ago was about this exact thing happening to her. And she reread a series that she previously didn't like, and now she likes it, and she can't remember why she didn't like it before. And I think that's just so cool. I haven't yet seen another booktuber tackle books in that way before. But then again, I haven't watched all booktubers. I've watched a lot, but not all of them. And so there could be another out there that does the same thing. But I saw it with Leonie and it just endeared her to me even more. Anyway, I adore the whimsy atmosphere she creates with every video and the way she goes in depth into a series of books or particular subjects that aren't commonly spoken about. Like in this one in-depth video she made about the evolution of characters who are witches in storytelling, and it was relatively long, but that video had me spellbound to the end. Pun very much so intended. So yeah, Leonie definitely was going to make it into this list because I keep going back to her videos and they keep just fascinating me even more because every video I repeat just shows me something new that I hadn't seen before, and that's brilliant. So why do I think Leonie would like reading my books? Well, for starters, Leonie is a lover of love. She loves reading a good romance, and my book has a heavy romantic subplot. However, the one thing that Leonie does have a preference for when it comes to romance is that it is done in a way that shows chemistry between the characters, and that this chemistry is on the page, not told, but actually shown. And she wants to see a reasonable development of the relationship over time. And I mean, this is a reasonable request because a lot of romance sometimes can feel forced. And it's one thing that I try to do to make sure that the relationships in the book, because there are several romantic relationships, were properly developed over time throughout the books, throughout the trilogy, so that it made sense that these people who are actually in a relationship are not just some weird romantic plot that was put in there just to have a romantic plot. And the other thing that I remember from one of Leonie's videos is that she loves quest storylines. And, well, the trilogy that I wrote just happens to be a quest storyline. So hopefully that'll be something else that will draw her in and that will get her willing to read the books. Murphy was pretty much the booktuber who introduced me to BookTube. Hers were the first videos I watched on YouTube where I had the portmanteau BookTube, and that led me down the rabbit hole into becoming a bona fide member of the BookTube and AuthorTube communities. But even as I discovered more members of these communities, Murphy's videos just continued to hold most of my attention, and I would usually come back to her channel and rewatch dozens of videos for how influential they were in improving my writing. The reason I loved her videos was because they have such a cool vibe to them. And as a book reviewer, Murphy is one of the most most introspective readers in the booktube space. She reflects really deeply on what she reads, how it makes her feel, and she even tells you how other books tackle similar themes to help us, the audience, understand the book she's reviewing even better. I also love how Murphy is always so enthusiastic in her delivery, and she's always encouraging, she's inspiring, and she's extremely genuine in her emotions. There's always this infectious hope and optimism in her commentary that is just impossible to resist. Watch any one of her videos, and it's easy to see how Murphy really values the medium of storytelling via written media. And now I'm going to stop fangirling and tell you why I think Murphy wouldn't mind reading my work. To be completely honest, I don't actually know if Murphy would like my book. Funnily enough, a few weeks after I'd finished writing my books, I was rewatching one of her old videos, and it's the one where she mentions her least favorite tropes. And to my horror and utter amusement, I must admit, every trope in that video is a feature of my book. I was actually laughing like a lunatic, thinking about how she is easily the one booktuber I have watched the most and I would love to have written for. And yet I wrote a book that encompassed every single one of her least favorite tropes. That was just so incredibly hilarious. I don't know if she would like to read my book, but I do think that she might be interested in looking at it because she's an incredibly prolific reader and she picks up a wide array of genres to indulge in. And maybe my relatively short vampire adventure quest would be something she'd consider reading on just some random Tuesday in support of a random indie author. And yeah, it wouldn't hopefully infuriate her or bore her to tears. But I don't think she would voluntarily just pick up what I've written. If she does get to read this one, being my favorite booktuber, that would be amazing. And maybe that's all. Maybe I just have to ask her, Yeah. But I don't know. When Jack Edwards describes books, especially his favorite literary classics, I usually feel like there's no way I could ever achieve the intricate expertise of the type of writing he's describing. Now, you'd think that would make me feel insecure and awful about my amateur writing skills, but it actually does the opposite. I like his videos because I find myself writing notes and taking it all as a challenge to grow into this authorial complexity of the literary books that he reads. And I absolutely love his videos. Jack is eloquent, he's thoroughly analytical, and he has this penchant to search for and share poignant literary quotes from books, and it is amazing. Like the quotes he shares, chills. And he's never pretentious, he's never overly serious, and his vibe is light, it's fun, it's charming. I can't forget to mention his dad jokes, his ridiculous puns, his hilarious metaphors, and all that good stuff that peppers his commentary. So for that reason, I can't stop watching him, and he has really influenced how I look at my writing and how I look to improve in the future. So, yep, he definitely has a place in this list. To be honest, like Murphy, whom I talked about before, I don't think Jack would ever voluntarily gravitate towards a post-apocalyptic new adult action-adventure paranormal romance. It's just not really a genre he particularly reads that often, but he has done several Wattpad videos where he reads Wattpad stories. And seeing as my books were first published on Wattpad, maybe there's hope that he'd read it, if only for more Wattpad content on his channel. He also likes books that are heavy on well-developed and fleshed out 3D characters. And on most good days, I feel like my book falls into that category. So here's to hoping that maybe it might pique his interest to read my book. Okay, so I'm bilingual and I have an elementary skill in 2 other languages. But I have always envied those who are fluent in sarcasm, like Natalie of the Weirdo Book Club channel. I cannot overstate just how witty, brilliant, and entertaining her sarcastic roasts are. I could rewatch her videos a dozen times and find something new and hilarious each time I did. And the thing is that these savage roasts are done in the most wholesome and fun ways without a single hint of mean spirit, which makes it really easy to listen to. And because of that, I just had to add Natalie to this list, especially because she takes on the difficult task of reading and reviewing genres of books that I find difficult to engage with. Through it, she points out plot, structure, and character issues with the books that help me continue to hone my writing skill in my preferred genre, and I don't have to suffer through it. And so, definitely one of the people who are in this list, even though I only just discovered her a few months ago. I think Natalie wouldn't mind reading my work because she enjoys reading and reviewing romance books, with queer romance being a favorite. And she also doesn't mind exploring darker aspects of storytelling, which means that my decision to characterize my vampires as having the ability to display a powerful, gory side to them compared to the relatively muted vampires in more popular vampire romance book won't throw her off. I feel like these books would also be a palate cleanser from the last few books she's reviewed, and so that might be another reason why she might like reading my books. I don't think there's a single one of Sydney's videos that I have watched to the end without laughing out loud more than once. Cindy is hilarious, she's articulate, she's anachronistic in the best way possible, and she just seems like an all-out fun person to hang out with. Her media reviews are thoroughly engaging. There are so many facets to what she loves in a story, and it's all informed by this fascinating intersectional point of view that unfolds wonderfully in her hilarious self-deprecating narration style. I also like that she reviews a huge array of books, from fictional genres to a generous sprinkling of non-fiction works, and her wrap-up videos are for the ages. She is also working on a sapphic novel, and that just endears me to her even more because I made a solemn vow about a decade ago to make every single protagonist I write a lesbian because I was horribly shamed for being suspected to be a lesbian when I was a teen, and I almost let that push me to hate myself. But I didn't hate myself in the end, and this choice in my writing is an ode to my past self. And last but not least, some of my favorite booktube videos are Cindy's side-splitting, ridiculously irreverent roast videos. I live for those. Like, if you haven't watched a Cindy roast video, please go watch one, because why? What are you doing with your life? Those are some of the best videos out there on YouTube, and I guarantee you will be smiling at the end of every single one of those roast videos. So why do I think Cindy would like my book? Well, for starters, character dynamics in stories are interesting for Cindy. She loves how characters develop, how they interact, how they face and tackle conflict and embrace romance. And I kind of think this is well represented in my story. Well, I'm hoping it's well represented in my story, because in this story, the main character is deeply flawed and she's challenged throughout the story. Nothing comes easy to her. She has to fight for her goal. She has to fight for her relationships. She has to fight for her boundaries. And even when she does, sometimes she doesn't make the right choice and she has to face the consequences of her actions. And that was really fun for me to write, and hopefully it'll be really fun for people to read, especially Cindy. It's also a sapphic vampire romance with a love triangle, and I mean triangle in the complete sense of the word, not a V as the trope usually turns out to be, and it might be interesting for her to read through. She's also a fan of thematic content of books, and this story weaves quite a number of themes through it. Hopefully it's in a nuanced way, in a subtle way that doesn't take away from the story in a preachy kind of way. Most times I find that themes are too preachy in storytelling, especially modern storytelling. So I'm hoping that I did my thematic subject in my stories justice by making them nice and subtle and not in your face all the time. When I sit down and really think about it, I kind of want to be Elliot Brooks when I grow up. She's talented, she's compassionate, she's eloquent, and she has an incredible work ethic. Seriously, she's working on 2 personal YouTube channels, plus she has a collaborative channel that donates its proceeds to charity. That's just insanely incredible. And then there's this authenticity to Elliot Brooks that is really difficult to explain and rare to see in this commentary space on YouTube. And it just draws you to her and keeps you in her corner, always rooting for her to succeed, especially when she's going through the ringer. And I also love how she's always keen to make her videos interactive and is continuously providing us with opportunities to contribute our views as an audience on subjects that she offers, and then she shares those in her videos alongside with her own points of view, and it always makes for a really cool video. I find myself coming back to Elliot Brooks' videos, rewatching my favorites several times over for how thorough she is in pointing out bits and pieces of a narrative and then exploring it in novel ways that I wouldn't have considered. She's always leaving me with something new to think about in my writing, and so she definitely earned her place in this list. So why do I think Elliot Brooks might want to read my book? Well, the first thing is that she loves a well-constructed character. She's one of the booktubers who really pushed me to put a lot of emphasis on fleshing out my characters. I remember even assigning every single one of them a personality test value, like with the Enneagram personality test, just to make sure that every character was as well-rounded as possible. And then I gave every single one of them individual goals that weren't just automatically connected to the main character's goals, and tried to make sure that they all went through their own personal character arcs and it was individual to their circumstances. The story that I've written is also dealing with issues in a way that isn't always black and white. And I think that's a favorite thing about some of the books that Elliot reads. She does like a little bit more nuanced discussion of themes. And the world building of this post-apocalyptic dystopia is as extensive as I could get it without taking away from the story. And I think Elliot really likes a book that immerses her into the story. So I tried to put in a detailed look at how the different groups in the story live. For example, the humans who are bred in vampire bands compared to the wildling humans who are roaming the jungles. And even how different vampires live in the different enclaves. So in this world, there are 5 enclaves, and each enclave has a different way of life, depending on who's governing the enclave or who took over after the world ended 250 years ago. So yeah, with an interesting, hopefully immersive setting and a couple of decent characters that I had fun writing. And with any luck, I've done enough to draw Elliot Brooks into wanting to read my work, because that would just be such an honor. There are so many other booktubers who helped me write my books and whom I'd love to read it, but these are the ones that I keep coming back to over and over again. The ones I consciously and subconsciously turned into my target audience. The ones I actually wrote my book for. And this does have me questioning if it was a good idea to do this, but it's not an original act by any stretch of the imagination. I actually believe that the books we've come to call TikTok books were written by authors who made the BookTok crowd their target market. And it makes sense. These creators command large audiences and they help to sell books if they find yours interesting. But the question is it a good idea to write for these creators as your target audience? To be honest, I don't know. It works if the goal is to sell lots of books and make a living from one's writing, but does it work for writing as an art? I don't know. Here's my meta hope that a booktuber will watch this video and will get a commentary video answering this question in a couple of months, exploring this subject in depth. Is it worth it for writers to write for a creator audience? Or should they just write what they want to write and not consider an audience at all, because maybe that will be more authentic? I'm curious to see what booktubers actually think of having books written for them. That would be really fun to hear about. So booktubers, if you're out there, and if you by any chance run into this video, what do you think about having a book written just for you? Is that weird? I don't know. I think it would be a little bit weird. Having said that, I do know one thing. Without these booktubers acting as a kind of North Star for my writing, I don't think I would have found my way to the end of these books. Watching other creative people work tirelessly in their crafts, it made me sit my butt down and write, even on those days when I would have rather slept through or doom scrolled the day away. And for that reason alone, I cannot overstate just how grateful I am for their efforts, continuously inspiring me. And I know I'm not the only one. If you're out there and you've written and you've used booktubers as inspiration before, tell me so in the comments. I would be really fascinated to know if I'm not alone or if I'm the only weirdo. If you've watched to this point, thank you for spending your time with me. In the next video, I'll talk about the different types of booktuber videos that were instrumental in outlining my plots, not just the booktubers themselves, but the type of videos that they put out. For example, rant videos or trope videos or all sorts of other videos. Until then, have a wonderful day.